welcome to part 2. So let's get straight back into it with me trying to work out whether or not I've got a CPU failure. Right, so I've just tried popping a different CPU in because I couldn't see anything on any of the CPU lines. I could see the clock and I could see it was ready, but for example there was nothing on the sync line. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And with this one, I've got data on the sync line. So that's now happy. And I think I've got stuff happening on the address lines, which I have. Nothing on that one, but I don't know what should be there. Okay, I'm still getting no beeps or anything. I'll just do a reset with that on here just to see if no, I don't think that's anything. So right, okay, well that's not a great start then. The clock circuit was dead, the CPU's dead, so what next? Okay, well let's check the ROMs. So 2332 in these. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that. That says 901465-22, which is exactly what that one is. So that one's okay. I'll check the other one. I've only got 2 of them in sockets. The other 3 are not. But I'll test these. Anyway, well, that's the first chip I've actually looked at that's definitely working. So that's the other one that's in a socket. And that's just giving me that CRC, so it doesn't recognize it. It's not in its database. It seems a bit weird that I'd have the one chip in its database and not that one. I have to actually take a copy of that and have a look. Okay, so I've had a good poke about, and on the ROMs, generally speaking, we can see data on everything, on all the address and all the data lines. They all look fine. The only one that doesn't look fine is the chip select 1, which is on 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, which is on this. And if we give that a reboot, if you can see off there in the distance, it does look like there's some data there. But this is absolutely not what I'd expect to see. So that seems relatively good, because I can see activity, but we're not enabling, at least not on that one. I guess I can check on these because that uses a different chip select line than these ones. So we've got the various selects here. So I'm going to have a little look here and try and have a dig around here and see if I can find out what's going on. Right, so the select lines all come into this 74154 4 to 16 decoder. So it's got the 4 inputs there, A, B, C, D, and then we've got the 16 outputs here, 0 to 15. So that should take a binary signal there and then convert it into sets of signals here. So as long as we've got data coming in on A, B, C, and D, you'd expect to see at least some difference with these, with them being high or low, and if these are flicking about, then you'd expect these to flick about. And if we pair it on and we have a little poke about in here, we can see that we've got data. Oops, sorry, data. We've got data on all of them. And then if we have a look at the outputs, floating, 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 floating. They're all, I mean, they're sort of high. They're all like 1.5 volts to 2 volts. So I'm gonna make an assumption, and that chip is stone cold. I don't know how hot they run. I definitely haven't got any. I've got a few other decoders, but definitely don't have one, and by the looks of it, it does actually use most of the outputs. So I'm gonna have to root around on some spares boards, see if we've got any spares. I'm gonna pull it and I'll test it, but I'm pretty sure that's not working. So if I haven't got any, I'm gonna have to order some in. Right. You got her out. And you got this, and let's do some beeping. 74154. 1, 5, 4. 4x16 decoder. Yep. Dead. Okay. Although actually, ooh, I'm not in. Let's just double check that again. Yeah, no, it was making contact. Right. Let me see if I can get one. Yep. Okay, right. Well, that's all I can do for now anyway. So let's get that. Let's get that on order. Okay, so absolutely ages later. So hopefully this is what we have. Let's give it an open. I really don't know what's happened to Royal Mail lately. This has come from about 50 miles away. And I also ordered some stuff from China, and that has got here quicker than this did. So I don't know what they're doing. Oh, that's really good. Okay, 74154. Yeah, so could test it, but just go with it. Be alright. Put it back to front. Let's not do that. Put it in the right way around. There we go. Okay. Right. Let's give that a power on and see what happens. Everything's alright, nothing's budging, that's okay, yep. Still no beeps. But do we see any activity? Okay, we are seeing some kind of activity on this. I'm going to go to check, but it does look like something's holding it high. Well, that's more than we had before, but yeah, definitely looks like something's holding it high. Right, I'll do some more poking and I shall be back. it seems like I'm now mostly over the incredibly obvious faults. So the outputs on here that were all looked high, I think that's probably correct. The one that does show activity is actually select F, and if we look at select F is the enable line for UD6 ROM chip, which I'm guessing is the boot ROM. So it does seem to be, if we have a look on this, we've got activity on the chip enable pin on that ROM. We've also got activity across all of the address and all of the data bus, and we can check that the RAM, at least here on this side, is active, and that the RAS and the CAS lines are showing activity. Let's actually pull that data sheet up to have a look. So I haven't got, the CPU is fine, it's not in halt or anything like that. So at the moment everything looks okay, but I'm not getting any other activity on the other ROMs. It's like it's stuck executing on the first ROM, assuming that I should see the others. I have no idea. I don't know what this looks like when it boots. So I'm gonna have a little look. I've checked the buffers and they sort of seem okay. We've got slightly unusual signals on these ones, but that could be normal. We've got the sort of weird half signal, so I might have a little dig into where that's coming from, and then I'll also look at the rest of the memory circuit, because although we can see activity and I can see the enable lines and the read and the write, maybe it's not getting through whatever's supposed to be buffering the RAM. So I'll do some more digging, but yeah, nothing obvious now. Right, so the only thing which I can see that looks a bit weird is if I actually zoom in to the data lines here off the main RAM chip and have a look at the scope, what I can see is kind of that the majority of the signals are bouncing between sort of 2.3 and 4.3 volts, and it's only every now and then that you get a spike down. And what that kind of looks like is, when I was looking at it originally, it sort of looks like that, but we can see that actually most of the data here isn't dropping down. So it does seem like the data lines, and it's the same on just about all of the data lines here. And that one's very weird. So yeah, zoomed in at this level, they don't look right. So, and I've had a quick look, you know, the RAS and CAS buffers here seem to be working, but they're not linked to the data lines. So I guess I'm going to have a look at that and see what we can find out. Right, more digging. Okay, well, I've run out of brain power for today. I'm going to have a little read up. I basically know nothing about these, so I'm going to have a little read, see if I can see people with a similar problem, see if there's some diagnostic steps that are always useful. I mean, I don't even know whether this will boot up without the keyboard on. I have quickly tried that and it doesn't make any difference. But I don't know if there's any gotchas like that. So I'll read up on those, make sure I'm not causing myself more misery than I need to. And also I'll have a look. Normally with stuff like this, people have done like a test ROM. So I can replace the kernel ROM here with something a bit more basic, because presumably that's doing a whole lot of stuff. And actually we could just be pinging a few things on the board, like enabling the chips and seeing if that works. You can normally isolate all the RAM. I do know that you can even get test carts on these that go on one of the interfaces. I don't know what any of those are, because there's actually a ROM disable line here, no ROM, that will actually disable all the ROMs here, so you can boot from an external ROM without doing anything. But I've got spare EPROMs, so I can build myself a new test ROM. But I'll do a bit of reading, so I know what I'm actually talking about and not just fumbling around. And I shall be back. Okay, so done a little bit of reading up, but before I carry on, I don't want to keep powering this on and off because we've got quite a big cap here. So what I'm going to do is going to do a bit of arts and crafts time. Got my little box, got some buttons. There you go, you can see. And what I'm going to do is we replaced the 555 timer circuit and the two caps. And the one cap that's responsible for charging up and holding the reset off is this one, C50. So what I'm going to do is grab a button. We've got some nice little buttons, but I've got some bigger ones here. And on the side, you've got what I'm assuming is like a cable relief or something. I guess if you had a external keyboard or something, I don't know. Anyway, I've got this, and I haven't got the top of the case with me here, but I'm guessing because this is sort of flat that the case won't foul that. So a nice red one, I think, for reset. If we that looks pretty much, and it's got some, yeah. So that's bang on the right size for that. Like a glove. So that'd be better. So going to get a wire from here over to the cap here on the 555 timer, pop a resistor on it to ground to discharge that and hopefully trigger a reset. So let's give that a go. Okay, so what I have done is we have the little push button here. I've taken a ground off where I'm actually grounding it here, off this screw mount, so I can just put a screw terminal so I can remove it if I want to. And then we go under the board, we come up here and onto the leg of that capacitor there, using my huge ream of little thin silicon wire. So what we should have now is, if we have a little look at the signal here, we're high, and pressing this button should drain the cap on the 555 timer and reset the reset. So low, high. So that seems to be working. So now I'm not powering it on or off all the time whilst I'm poking about. So I've got a few things I'm going to check over. So I'll look over all of the points that I've identified as areas to check first, and if I find anything, I shall let you know. So now I've got my lovely red button. I'm going to start having a look at some of the items on the bus. So I've scribbled some notes out on things to check. So I'm going to start with the CRT controller and check that we're getting the right outputs on that. I'm also just going to double check that, because I was fairly sure I was only seeing the kernel ROM enable. And hopefully I'm seeing more than that. So I'll just double check on that, because what I'm going to try and do is replace this, which is the edit ROM, which I think it held like localizations for different countries and stuff. So the kernel ROM will boot code off that. So I'm going to have a go at using this, which is David Roberts's PET test 2K ROM, test ROM. Very clever chap. So I'm going to pop that on one of these, I think. Yeah, although I'll test them first. Yep. So 2716, using that and pop it in there. But I'll do a couple of little checks beforehand, and then we'll see what happens and see what that does. There's loads of information in the document with that ROM, and he's generally about to answer questions because he's a nice guy. Right, let's give that a go. Right, so we're getting no chip enable on that anyway, so it's kind of pointless, which still goes back to this, which is supposed to be doing most of the enabling. So I've dug this fellow out, and we're having a little look at the inputs on here on ABCD, which should correspond to the output. So we've got this set up as a bus, with A as the most significant bit, and I have put the test ROM in, but it's never going to boot because we are only getting an enable on this. And if we run this, so we have a look, so that's it, looking at the bus there, and if we just do a stop here, it's just 15, 15, 15, 15, 15, 15, 15, 15, 15. So the only signal that we're getting into the decoder is 15, which corresponds to 15, pin 17, select F, which is the select for the kernel ROM. So we're not getting past that at all. So we're booting the kernel ROM, nothing's then happening from there on. So I'm going to have a little dig about. Kind of guessing that that's possibly is a bus issue or something, but we'll have a look, because I'd assumed it perhaps would have at least tried to enable one of these, or maybe it's a RAM failure. Anyway, I'm going to do some more digging, but yeah, okay. The suggestions I've had is that sometimes the ROMs can go bad and cause issues on the data lines, so it's probably worth socketing these anyway, because then I could swap them out if I want to, and also it's the only place on the board that actually looks like it's had prior work done. So we've got that fired up, and I'm going to pull these out, get a socket on, test them, and pop them back on if they're fine. Well, that appears to have been surprisingly easy. They're all, well, he says that, they all seem pretty much loose. Sometimes these can really fight you. But yeah, that one's coming out. Yeah, that one's definitely come out. That one's out. Maybe that just needs a little bit of something in the bottom pin there. But yeah, they all look okay. I'll clean those up, get them tested, pop some sockets in. Okay, so we might have something here. So if I take the UD9 chip and we pop that on, and we've got this as 2332, and if we give that a read, we can see it reads it, detects it as a CBM 4016. So if we swap that out and we try the UD10 chip, in there. Let me give that a read. Then we can see that it's not identified. Now that's not unusual for something that it doesn't have a CRC match on. But if we have a look at that, if we do this again, so we've got starts 78, ends A5. We give it another read. We've got a different CRC, which means either that's not a 2332 or it's faulty. So I'll do a bit of digging, but hopefully that does mean that that is not working. Oh, this is annoying. I haven't got any sockets the right size at the moment. I've used them all up. So I could either trim 2 rows off these or cut these in half. Oh, I don't like either. I think I'll just trim 2 off those. Oh well. They're all out, only the kernel ROM in, and that hasn't resolved the issue. I'm still seeing the weird data lines. Now, that's a pause on the data line when it's idle, so between the bursts, and we can see there that it's effectively 2 volt, idling at 2 volt, which doesn't make any sense. I think the next chips that were suggested are some of these here. I'll have to double check and see what they suggest. I'll have another look over the schematic, see if there's anything else. And there we go. That's the warmest of the chips. I don't know if that's normal or not. 6520. There's 2 of those. Yeah, I don't know. Right, I'm going to have a little read up, and if needs be, we'll start having a look at these. I don't really like pulling loads of chips, but unless it's sort of the easiest way of identifying the issue on the bus. So, and they're coming out real easy. So I haven't got a problem. I'm not damaging the board in any way. Right. Yeah, would you know, I have got one 2732. However, my laptop has decided to die. So I'm waiting on that getting a motherboard replacement, which means that the only working PC that I've got in this room is a Powertran Cortex, and I don't think that's going to be very good for writing ROMs. I also need to just double check the pin. I know it says that they're pin compatible with 27, 16 for the edit ROMs and 32s for these. I'm sure there's some difference with the enable lines, with them being reversed on a normal 2332 like these use. But I'll have a little check about that. But anyway, I can't write that at the minute anyway. But until we've got the enable lines going and the issues with the data lines, I'm not going to be booting anything anyway. So let's carry on. Okay, so here's my thinking. So the things that are on the data bus are these, the RAM. We haven't got anything over here still plugged in. Now, if it was the RAM, I wouldn't be seeing the issue, or at least I don't think I'd be seeing the issue across all the data lines, unless they were all bad in the same way. So if I have a look at the data lines that run across, so there's one, there's another, there's another, and another. They're all showing this same issue. So if I show you what one of the, there you go. So that's a full wave that's going from sort of 0 up to 5, and then that's what we're seeing on the data lines. So I would expect to just see that on, say, some of the data lines, not all of them. So the CPU has been replaced with a known good CPU. So I'm going to pull these other four and I'm going to socket them, because they are apparently another failure point, and it's good to have them in sockets. So whilst I don't like pulling stuff, as I keep saying, because it's on the data line, I could pull one and then test it, and then pull the next one and then test it, but I might as well just resocket these. I can also check underneath it, make sure there's not like a woodlouse underneath one of them. But that's what I'm going to do. And we're off. So they're all off. The only one that looks a bit manky is this one up here. They're all a bit on the corroded side. So I'll clean them all up, straighten all these legs, get some sockets in, and then I'll see if we can test it without them in. Right. No chips. So I've only popped one socket back in. I've pulled the CPU out, and I thought, well, let's boot it up and let's have a look at what the data lines look like with effectively nothing. So you've still got the kernel ROM in there. We've got that one as well. Can't remember what that one is. And let's have a look with what's still sitting in there. And if we check down here, so the first one, that's data line 7. So it's just high. It's not doing anything. So if we check 6, same. 5, same. 4, and we're getting that. 3, 2, it's back to being okay. 1, weird again. And 0, weird again. So let's check my laptop. Those are the data lines on here that we can see running down here, and they don't show them connecting to anything, so there's no caps in this bit of the circuit. So I'm going to have to go and have a little look around then and find what else actually sits in these bits. I might pull the last couple of chips out just to see if that makes any difference. But yeah, right, I'll go check some schematics. Yeah, so there's UD6 out, and they're all looking okay. So why would that be holding some at a kind of floating voltage? That, I can read that ROM fine, that CRC checks. I wonder if it's got an issue. Weird. Okay, I'll do some thinking. I've managed to get this laptop booted one more time. It's having a motherboard replacement in 2 days' time. But for this very second, it's stable. And I've got the 2732 in, and I've got the UD6 kernel ROM image in. That's flashed. That says it's flashed successfully. It should have done a verify anyway. Let's do a quick read on this. And that does seem to be reading okay, and that looks all right. So I think that's written okay. I've made a little adapter up. There's not really much to it. You just swap in 2 of the lines down and set one of the chip select lines to ground. So we'll see if that makes any difference to the weird data lines. Got my little adapter with the kernel ROM on, which I've printed out some of the ROM chips so I can try and work out what I'm doing. So 21 going down to 18, 18 going over to 20. Slightly misleading because it's like 20 still going to 20, but it's not. That's just being grounded. It means that you can't use the no ROM line. And then I think a 2716 would be about the same, apart from VPP probably just wants to go to 5 volt there. I'll pop some more sockets in just to get these other ones back up so that we can pop those chips back in. I don't know whether it works without them or not. And I'll replace this cap as well. I've got some much smaller replacements for that. I've got a much bigger replacement for that. So I might swap those out as well. Right. We're all back together. So I've put the kernel ROM in that I've made in the original edit ROM. I'm assuming I don't need any others to do a bit of testing. We're all back together. I've got my huge cap there. And this does seem to have sort of worked. So most of the data lines that were looking bad, so if we check this one here, we can now see that looks far more healthy. But D2 still looks like that. There's D1 and D0. So I'm still seeing something weird on D2. Now, perhaps in hindsight, I shouldn't have put these chips back in because they were desoldered. So actually pushing them into a socket, you have to use a bit more force, and they can damage the sockets if you take them in and out too many times. So maybe I should have started off with them out, but I don't know if it does boot with them out. I'd assume it boots with them out because they're just parts of the cassette circuit, which I shouldn't. I'm assuming it doesn't check on boot. But yeah, I'll do a little bit of digging then. So we're making progress, but still not really getting too far. Thought a good quick thing to do to check is to put my adapter in and set this on to read a 2332 rather than a 2732 with the adapter in place, and it's reading it there as the CBM 4016 ROM. So that's good because that's what it should be. So I'm pretty sure that's working. I've made another little adapter up for the 2316, which is to a 2716. I could have just made another 2732 adapter and doubled the image up, but I thought I might make one of each anyway, because then I've got them. I'll probably get some proper ones made up if I'm going to go down this route, so that just gives me one of each. So that should be the test ROM, I think. I might read it back into the actual EEPROM reader just to check, see what it thinks. But I might give that a go. Failing that, I might start pulling some of the chips that I resocketed in just to see if any of those are responsible for the D2 issues. Okay. So we know we've got a slightly unusual issue with data line 2. And data line 2, although they do all look a bit odd, and data line 2, we can see the same issue here on, because we've got the data line comes in from the RAM here, and we can see it also present on this buffer chip here, which seems to have the inputs and the outputs joined. So I'm guessing it's just sort of amplifying or something, or buffering. So rather than having in and an out, they're just both connected. But on the other side of this, we can also see the same issue, and this side of this buffer goes across here into pages 8 and 9, and 8 and 9 are the odd and even video RAM circuit. So 9 I don't have populated, that's this empty bit here, but page 8 here I have, which is the buffers here and the video RAM here. And I can see on UB5 everything looks okay, but on UB4 I can see the same issue, and we can see that on the RAM as well. So this RAM chip here, the data lines aren't happy. This RAM chip here, all the data lines look happy. So I'm gonna perhaps have a look at pulling this buffer off here, just to see, because that'll isolate any of, if there are some strange issues coming in on this side that are impacting that. And then I can try and see whether that's causing the issue here, or if perhaps the one here is causing the issue. I'll show you what I'm seeing. So if we have a look at the video RAM and we have a look at the data lines, which are 11, 12, 13. So on this side, so let's just pick 12. So that's what it looks like on the one, and that's what it looked like on the other. And so there you go. So you got that one, that one, that one. None of those look very happy, and on the one that looks okay, we've got the same on that, but we've got these ones all look pretty happy. So something's not right. I could have a failed RAM chip, so I'm going to work around this. I'm going to try and find out what's going on here. Have we got an issue with the IC4 video RAM? Have we got an issue with the UB4 buffer, or have we got an issue with the other buffer that's feeding into them up there? So I'm going to have to pull some chips and have a look. So I don't see the weird issue with the replaced ROM in. I haven't got the CPU in, so let's pop the CPU in and see if we get any activity. Just before I start pulling chips, I've done a little bit of piggybacking to see if that helps. I've got some 74244s, which I've tried over the top of here. I've got some RAM here for the video memory, and the RAM that we've got here, the main system RAM. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to pull off the RAM that's sitting in data line 2, so the D2 RAM bit. I think it's got a fault. I can't see any other reason why we would be seeing the issue that we're seeing, and everything now being okay apart from that one. And I think rather than pulling off the buffer at the moment, I might just resocket these two. Now, I know that one of them is definitely fine, and the other one, there's no reason why it would be behaving, but piggybacking on it doesn't make any difference, so it might be okay. But I'd quite like to get the RAM in a socket. I know loads of people just socket all the RAM because, you know, common failure point, and makes it nice and easy to service in the future. But at least if I pull those off, I'll be able to see whether the issue is with the RAM or with the buffers. Generally speaking, I haven't had too much trouble with buffers unless they get like spiked and blown. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take those off, socket them, just so they're serviceable, and I can test the one, and I'm going to pull the D2 on, because it should boot even with this section not working. Right, I've pulled out and socketed the two SRAMs and the DRAM. So let's grab the retro chip tester and let's have a little look and see what it thinks about these, because it looked like one or maybe both or neither of the two SRAMs here. So these are 2114s. So 2114. So that's one there. So oh, we can't really see. So there's 2114. And okay, that's interesting. And let's try the other one. Okay, we're definitely in. Okay, that failed. Different point, but it still failed. Let me grab one of my tested ones. So here's just a double check. Yeah, okay. So according to this, both of those SRAM chips are dead. So let's go back and let's check for the 4116. Okay, right, that doesn't even detect the chip. Okay, right, I'm starting to get flashbacks from Missile Command here. Right, let's swap these chips out and see if that's made any difference. I don't actually have any 4116, but I do have some 4164s, and the only real difference with those is they don't need the dual voltage. So if you just pull pin 1 off, stop it from getting zapped, I think it's pin 1 that's the voltage, and you bridge pin 8 over to 9, so you don't have pins 1 and 8 in the socket, then that works as a 4116. Not brilliant. I think some people do actually adapt the whole boards and just swap them out and replace them, so you just do away with the 12 volt rail, but that should at least allow us to test. Right, so we're all back together. I've got the test ROM in as well, but I don't know whether I need all the other chips in. The data lines, so there's 0, 1 now is the one that looks a bit weird. Here is the one that looked dreadful before. That looks fine. That one looks okay. I mean, they don't look. The only one now which looks odd compared to the others is data line 1. And if we check the data lines coming out of the RAM here, the SRAM, they look good and they look okay. So there's no weird signals on these chips. So we're definitely getting somewhere. I don't have an enable. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 on these. So don't have an enable on the edit ROM. Just on the kernel. So progress. I'll do some more digging, see if I can find what the next thing that's wrong. Hopefully, I don't have a problem with all the RAM chips. It's possible that they're all gone, but let's have a look. I'm just going to pull some more RAM out, I think. I'll pull this one out, and if that one's faulty, I'm just going to pull the whole lot out, socket it, and I think if I'm doing that, I might do a mod to switch over to the 4164s. So the only real difference, apart from them being a much bigger chip, is that it's pin 1 that we disconnected there, that's not 12 volt, that's the -5, and pin 8 that's also pulled out, that's the 12 volt, positive 12, and the 4164s only need 5 volt on pin 8, which is what we're doing here. We're going over from where the 5 volt is normally on pin 9 over to the other side to give it the voltage. So what I'd have to do is cut the rails that are feeding the -5 and the 12, and I don't need the -5, so that can just be disconnected altogether. And then I just need to join the 5V and 12V rails, and then in theory that flips this over to be able to just take 4164s, and I can do that in both sets of sockets for when if I ever get around to doing the 32K upgrade. So I'll pull some more chips off and we'll test them and see if we've just got complete RAM failure. Alright, okay. Well, I've pulled the top two off, and that's one of them. And this is the other one. Ooh. Right, so maybe they're not all dead. Oh, dilemma time. So, pulled 3 of them off. 2 of them did look dead, and the one of them I just pulled off anyway because I was going to work my way down, and that one is okay. I think I'm going to socket it and try one more of the 4164s, and then hope I don't have to pull the rest of them off. If it does look like I've got another one with an issue, I'm just going to pull them all off and we're going to convert it over to the 4164s. Right. I've pulled all the RAM chips off and we've got 5 that still work. So I am going to convert it over to the 4164s, I think, just because those are what I've got. And it looks like it might be quite easy because I don't think anything is using the -5 or 12V bar the DRAM here. And the pin 1 is the -5V, which I've removed the regulator. So that's sorted. And on the 4164, it doesn't use pin 1. So we should just be able to leave it like that. And then for pin 8, all we want is to go from 12V to 5V. Now I've actually got an adjustable buck regulator there, so I can actually just wind that down to 5V. Meaning that if you did want to reverse it, all you need to do is set that back to 12 and pop the regulator in there. I think, unless I'm missing something, but that's what I'm going to do. So let's get some sockets in here. Pull the feed, the out lead off that, and adjust it back down to 5V. And see if that makes a difference. I'm going to pause that here. That's long enough. I'll get a part 3 version out as soon as I can. But if you've been watching, thanks for watching.